Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about a subject of really it's anti-white measures taken in the West, a series of small measures, whether it be in employment or in other areas. I'll focus particularly on employment, given I'm sort of a bit closer to that maybe than I am to some of the other stuff, but it goes something like this. And I've got a number of sort of stories or anecdotes here that I've collected, and didn't think it was really worth a video, but collectively, in aggregation, I think it is. So one place, a decent sized firm, they've decided that when a well-qualified straight white male applies for the job, they'll engage in an exhaustive, detailed background check. Now, why do they do that? Is it because they doubt what the guy's saying, or is it because he's going to make life and death commercial decisions for the company? Therefore, they need to be sure. No, it's actually not. None of those things. What they're trying to do, and the very sort of, I don't think she's a lesbian, by the way, but this very angry white woman who's convinced that all white people are evil, white society is evil. She's really bought into this white history is all evil, slavery, and her job, as she sees it, is to find any reason to disqualify hiring the white guy, disqualify him from employment. And so if they do a background check, because you have to pay for these things, they do a background check and nothing comes up, then they'll just double down, do an even more exhaustive background check. And there's quite a lot of deceit that goes into these things. And I've had people try and come to me for background checks, and they'll use all sorts of subterfuge, which rather defeats the purpose. You're meant to do a background check to verify honesty and accuracy of the background, reliability, so someone doesn't say they worked for 100 years, at place X, when in fact they've never even been anywhere near it, that sort of thing. So, and that's, I suppose, got its place. But in this instance, they're only doing it because the guy's straight, white, and male. They're not doing it to other people. They're not doing it to the black guys or the women or the other minorities. They're only doing it to straight, white males. Now, you get a call that'll go something like, "Hey, look, I'm from so-and-so. I'm just looking for Billy Bob, and we're just trying to, he's overpaid on a loan that he had, and so we've calculated. Our accounts department said we owe him a couple of $1,000, and we just want to find him so we can do that. How long was he working there? What do you know? And who is his best buddy? And they'll try and dig information out on this very spurious notion that they're representing a finance company that owes him money, those sorts of things. So now, having been around for long enough, I don't fall for that shit, but a lot of people might. But so the subterfuge is quite considerable in doing this, but they don't do it to, again, the non-straight white males, the women or the black people or the lesbians and so on. They don't get the same thing. Now, you're much more likely to get, because the straight white males are far more likely to have got what they are on merit. So their CV is likely to be, what they say, and everything's likely to be spot on or close to it, or maybe a little bit of color at the margins, but otherwise, reliable and accurate in at least their capabilities. But so you're much less likely to get that from other people that are trying to get a job they're not qualified for, and so they may be very creative in what they're putting on their CV, but they're only checking the straight white males. And I'm seeing this sort of more and more around organizations where the diversity and inclusion director and the HR director are getting together and deciding they're going to get real tough on straight white males. And I think I've mentioned before, there's this company I came across where they've got a lesbian committee that has to approve the hiring of all straight white males. I mean, seriously. So, that lesbian committee doesn't have to approve, the hiring of the black black people or the non-white people. It's only straight white males are getting the treatment. Now, in another situation, there's a company that employs, they employ factory hands and I don't know, warehouse hands, that sort of thing. And so it's not well-paid work, far from it. So they've got they've introduced a policy where they used to have a policy where if you had any sort of criminal record, they wouldn't hire you. Now, that they found meant that nearly their entire workforce was white. So they relaxed the criteria and said that if you had a criminal record, it wouldn't matter as long as the term that you served in prison was 12 months or less. And they still didn't really get a whole lot of takers. So then, and they're publicly declaring this. So they're saying, look, it's okay. You can apply for the job. It doesn't matter if you've been in prison. And then they increased, I think, to 2 years. And they're getting a better result now. So 2 years or less in prison, and that doesn't disqualify you from work. I mean, depending on the crime, I suppose. If it's 2 years, then I can't imagine it's mass axe murdering or something, but I don't know. But it goes to illustrate there now, and now as a result, their preference is, in order to not hire white people, they're going to these lengths. So white people are missing out on work that otherwise would have gone to them. It now goes to non-white people with a criminal record. I mean, if that's not an upside down world, I don't know what is. Now, that doesn't mean if these people haven't served their time in prison, which is the punishment for, I don't know, whatever the court determined, it doesn't mean that they should be denied employment solely on that basis. They've served their time, they've paid their penalty, and they're entitled to employment just like anyone else is. So I believe very firmly in that. But nonetheless, those are things there. But this, whether it sounds like they're doing the right thing or not, is rather beside the point here. It means that white people are not getting employment as a consequence, and just because white people are less likely to have done jail time or prison time or been charged with a crime, then. The situation, I haven't been charged with a crime, but we don't want you, buddy, that sort of thing. And it seems quite perverse so anyway, the solution for people is not to be charged with crime. Surely that would be a better outcome. There's another situation where I came across quite recently where this is a department in not a huge company, but they're decent enough. It's like it's people. It's a department that does quite complicated costing for big bespoke manufactured machines. So it's quite detailed in a financial and engineering sense. So they're guys who do that. It pays between 2.5 and 3 times the average wage, so it's hardly a floor sweeper's job or something like that. So they're and the CEO who we were doing business with commented about how for the jobs that involve the high level of qualifications and credentials, that only white people applied, and if you did get the odd non-white person applied, they weren't even remotely close to having the necessary expertise to do the job. Now, he seemed to think this was a problem because he's hiring sort of straight white males, not complaining about the work they're doing, but merely that they're straight white males, and he wants to. And he's a white guy as well, by the way, and he wants to show his work credentials by hiring. He sort of dreams that he's going to, all these black lesbians are going to come along with some fantastic credentials, but they don't exist, not in the real world, certainly not this sort of work, which requires, very patient, thorough, painstaking examination of every nut and bolt and that sort of stuff. But what I noticed was this guy was burning through these people who are all white guys, and I've seen them, burning through these people quite quickly. So the last 12 months, I think he's burned through 11 people in 12 months. in this area. So now he only needs 2 at a time, so or 3 maybe, but typically 2 at a time. But somehow he's burning through these people quickly. Now I'd noticed there was a brown woman in a probably I guess late 20s there, and who to say the least was a very feral looking creature. And just talking to the CEO again, in fact, we're sitting down having a coffee, and the thing came up again indirectly because it sort of cut across some of the work we were doing. And I just asked him, so, hey, every time I come past, this seems to be a different face. And I'd assumed first off that it must be that he's got maybe some sort of a roster, people working at night or people working on different projects or something like that. And that would account for the different faces there. But he was no. He said, "Oh, they're racists. I had to get rid of all these racists, these Nazis and fascists." And I thought, what are you talking about? Can't imagine fascists and Nazis being attracted to that. And how could you have had, out of 11 people, 11 of them were fascists and Nazis, one after the other? You got some real problems with your hiring processes, buddy. I didn't say that, but so I sort of, without jumping all over it, I tried to gently egg him on so I could get more out of him, and so he was what what the fucking idiot had done is he had a problem. There's these straight white males, and they're the only people applying for jobs. He doesn't like it. He's got a problem with that. So he appoints a manager, a supervisor, someone to supervise them, who happens to be a young, again, late 20s, a brown woman. Now, I don't know if she was, I think she might have been born in Australia, but came at a youngish age. Got a bit of an accent, but not much. So I'd say she must have come to Australia, maybe when she was about 10 years old, around that. Maybe a bit earlier, but that's my guess. So here's this brown woman. Now, the single mother, brought up on the housing estates, massive chip on the shoulder, and convinced she's surrounded by white people who aren't, white, particularly white men who aren't, showing her due respect. I'm just from little interaction I had with them. My guess is she sees her way out of her position is finding a white guy with money, and I wouldn't call her ugly or anything like that, but she's certainly no beauty queen. I can't imagine that she's going to land a white guy who's on some sort of high-powered career trajectory, has got money. Maybe she can, but she's again the single mother, and she's living in some government housing or something, and a huge chip on her shoulder, and an almost pathological hatred of white men. So this guy, this CEO, he deliberately puts a brown woman in charge of these white guys as their boss. And now I'd heard the way one day she was talking to them, and it was if she was scolding, wayward, if not evil children who'd done something really evil. And that was her way of dealing with or talking to these people. Now, the CEO is convinced, or claims, I'm not sure he really believes it himself, but he asserts that the reason these white guys are quitting isn't because they're dealing with this feral animal who's who's talks to them like they're out on the mean streets of the drug dealers and the hobos. It's not that. No, the reason they're leaving is because they can't handle brown women, so they're misogynist, they're racist, they're fascist, they're Nazi, they're probably Hitler, and that's why they're leaving. And but a couple of the guys have complained to him about it, saying, "What have you got that feral animal, in charge of us for?" So that then proves the fact that they're all Hitler. Those two guys were Hitler or whatever it was, and so he's fired them. So I suggest just gently, well, don't you think that 500% turnover within 12 months of the folks in that department? Don't you think that's an indication of maybe maybe there's something else not quite right there. No, 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 damn fascist Nazis, and knew it as soon as I saw them, straight white males. So now again, he's a straight white male himself, but he's completely bought into this idea that straight white males are evil and Hitler and fascist Nazis are everywhere. And these Nazis are elusive. Does he know any Nazis directly? Well, no. Does he know anyone who knows Nazis? Well, no. But it doesn't matter. They're everywhere. I saw it on CNN or MSNBC. Nazis are everywhere. Fascist, Hitler. And so he's got this view that he's actually bringing these evil Nazis to book, and it's like the appointing this brown feral creature of a woman to be in charge of very well qualified white guys, where she's got no qualifications or credentials in anything, is the way to sort of flush out the Nazis. See, they complained about it. That proves they're Nazis. And I was looking at him, sort of not wanting to say anything. I don't want to annoy him. It's commercially sort of not a smart thing to do for me. So I sort of smiled but I was thinking, you fucking moron. But it shows how the anti-white West, anti-Western history, anti-white male, all that rhetoric, all that propaganda that's out there, is out there in spades, how it even permeates the consciousness of other straight white males who now are themselves turning against straight white males. Now, for the limited interaction I had with these people that are leaving, I mean, these are, again, they're fairly bright guys, reasonably well paid for that sort of work, and they're quite well qualified, and there couldn't be that many of them around, I wouldn't think. So I was a little bit intrigued that he would see it's worth risking the operations of the company he's supposed to be the CEO of by playing these ridiculous and absurd games. But nonetheless, now I'm seeing these sorts of things more and more, where government departments, private companies are putting angry, feral, chip on shoulder, brutish, particularly women, but men as well, but mostly women, in charge of an exclusively white department. And this is something that seems to be happening more and more. And I've seen it. I think I mentioned in a previous video, I saw a cleanup crew for a train doing the interchange turnaround to go back down the line. A train where there was a bunch of older white men and like a prison camp boss of an Asian woman who screamed at them and denounced them, and was quite savage in the way she spoke, including sort of spitting as she spoke to them. And I thought, wow, why would anybody tolerate this? And at first I thought, well, maybe they've just given her it's an affirmative action thing. As soon as they see how she's behaving, they'll take her off and put her on other duties. I don't think so. I think that's how they want it. I think the program to humiliate white males, straight white males, and grind their faces into the dirt, I think that's what it's about. At first off, I thought, no, it's an aberration, just a one-off here and there. I actually think it's now forming part of a program, and I think it's going to get worse. Maybe I'm wrong, but it certainly comes across that way. But also, I think there's other things too about straight white males are being sort of arbitrarily terminated from employment, and they're almost daring them to, well, you can say something if you want, but we'll just say that you're a racist or you're Hitler, and that'll you won't have any chance in court. And I see this quiet. In terms of anti-constitutional discrimination against straight white males, as an example, I think there's now a quiet agreement being done with say, the Department of Prosecutions, the courts, and so on, where they agree. Well, look, you can transgress the Constitution as long as you're doing it against straight white males. As long as you're doing that, it's okay. We won't prosecute you. So you go ahead and do that. And I think those deals are being done quietly in the back room with government operatives and so on, NGOs, the NGOs that are supposed to be running around looking for even the tiniest example of transgressing people's human rights, then straight white people are totally off limits. So that we won't do anything. We promise we'll do nothing. And government departments such as human rights departments and so on, they're not doing it. They're only interested if white people do it to black people or non-white people. That's the only interest they have, or to gay or trans or something like that. So I think those deals are being done quietly. I think it's happening all around, and I think it's increasing. And we can see other manifestations of this where the straight white person misgenders someone and they get time in prison for it. Whereas climate change activists, for example, can create absolute mayhem in the downtown area, destroy buildings, burn things down, do all sorts of stuff, and it's incredible. Right across the Western world, it seems remarkable and impossible that these activists always get a very sympathetic judge that lets them off with a slap on the wrist, assuming they get arrested in the first place. And there are even cases where the climate change activists are blocking the road and motorists try to move them out the way, and the police arrest the motorists and leave the climate change activists in place, even though they've got no permit to be doing it. So this goes to, I think, indicate that that all the mechanisms, be they subtle, be they in background or foreground, to undermine the West, undermine its confidence in itself, undermine straight white males, undermine social cohesion, undermine everything from top to bottom and in all dimensions. I think that's gathering apace, and with again these quiet backroom deals being done to make sure that there is no obstruction or limitation to the globalist project. You've been a Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.